Hi, this is Tim Urdan, author of Statistics in Plain English. And in this lesson, we are going to calculate a regression coefficient, the intercept, and a predicted value of y. So we have an example here where we are looking at age as our x variable and vocabulary test scores as our y variable. And we have a sample of 30 kids. The average age of our sample is 8 years old. Standard deviation is 3. Average test score is 50. Standard deviation is 10. And the correlation between these two variables is positive 0.40. So with this information, we can calculate and interpret a regression coefficient first. And here's the formula for it. That is the unstandardized regression coefficient. And to find that, you take the correlation coefficient times standard deviation of y divided by standard deviation of x. Let's plug in the numbers. So we have 0.40 for our correlation coefficient times 10, standard deviation of y divided by the standard deviation of x equals 0.40 times 3.33, and that, let's see, 0.4 times 3.33 equals 1.33. So that is what our regression coefficient equals, 1.33. And then we get to interpret it. What that regression coefficient tells us is that for every increase of 1 unit in x, so that is for every year older, for every increase of 1 year of age, we would expect a corresponding increase of 1.33 points on the vocabulary test. X is our predictor variable, y is our dependent variable. So for every increase of 1 year of age, we predict an increase of 1.33 points on the vocabulary test. That's on average, so not every kid's going to have that, that's on average. And that's just in this sample, we don't really know how this works in the population. So in this sample, that's what we would predict our increase in y to be for every increase of 1 unit in x. And it works the other way as well. For every decrease of 1 year, we would expect a decrease of 1.33 points in vocabulary test score. That's how you calculate and interpret a regression coefficient. Next, we'll take a look at how to calculate the intercept for this. All right, so we calculated our regression coefficient over here, b equals 1.33. Now we're going to calculate the intercept. This is where the regression line intersects with the y-axis. So this is the predicted value of y when x equals 0. And the formula is you take the mean for the y variable and subtract the mean for the x variable times the regression coefficient, or the slope. Our mean for the y variable is 50. B is 1.33. And our mean for our x variable is 8. So let's calculate this. 1.33 times 8 is 10.64. 50 minus 10.64 is 39.36. So that's our intercept, 39.36. And here's how you interpret it. When x equals 0, the predicted value of y is 39.36. So of course, this doesn't make any sense, right? If x is age and y is vocabulary test scores, literally what this would be saying is when the kid is 0, we would expect a kid's score on the vocabulary test to be 39.36. Doesn't make sense. Newborns don't have vocabularies. So this is a predicted value. It's a regression line, and sometimes there are values beyond what makes sense, what would be found in actual data. But it's still where the straight line would intersect, the straight regression line would intersect the y-axis when x equals 0. And although this doesn't make sense literally in terms of newborns having scores on vocabulary tests, it's very useful for actually finding predicted values of y at various values of x. You need the intercept to be able to calculate that, and we'll go through that in just a minute. Okay, now let's use our regression coefficient and our intercept to find a predicted value for y. And this is the formula. That y hat thing, that's what it's called, y hat, that's the symbol for the predicted value of y, equals the intercept plus the regression coefficient times, this is the slope, times a given value of x. So let's say we want to find a predicted vocabulary test score for a kid who's 10 years old. A is 39.36 plus the slope, or the B, 1.33 times the x value, which we said is going to be 10 years old, equals intercept plus 13.3 equals 4952.66. So the predicted value of a kid who is 10 years old on the vocabulary test is 52.66. A 10-year-old would be predicted to have a score on the vocabulary test of 52.66. That's how you find predicted values of y using regression. Now, one more point. That's the predicted value of a 10-year-old, but if we actually have 10-year-olds in our sample, they could differ from this quite a bit. For example, suppose we've got a 10-year-old in our sample who has a vocabulary test score of 60. The difference between the actual score of a 10-year-old and the predicted score of a 10-year-old is known as error, or a residual in regression. And to find it, you just subtract the predicted value from the actual value. Oops. That would be an individual y score, not an x score. So this residual would be 7.34. That is the difference between the observed value and the predicted value of y. And that is known as error. Okay, so that is how you calculate a regression coefficient, an intercept, predicted value of y, and a residual using simple regression. This is just one predictor variable and one dependent variable. Hope that's helpful.